The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development taking action against housing discrimination on Facebook. This coming after the technology giant agreed to take steps to block discriminatory ads on the platform last week. Joining me right now in an exclusive interview is U.S. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Dr. Ben Carson. Sir, it's good to have you on the program this morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you.
What was your reaction to the social media situation where they're trying to ban anything that is hate speech or certainly that is discriminatory when it comes to housing?
Well, you know, we've entered into a new era now. The technology has become such an integral part of our lives, and it's affecting us both in good ways and in bad ways. And what really is worrisome to me is the fact that you have these giant technological institutions like Facebook who mine data. They take personal information that you don't even know about. They know what other sites you've been visiting. They know what apps you've downloaded, what your interests are. And then to use this in an advertising forum and a platform where you can discriminate against people. You know, advertisers have the ability to say, I only want to advertise to women. I only want to advertise to non-Christians. You know, this kind of information most people don't know has been gathered on them, and we want to make sure it is not used in an inappropriate way.
Yeah, no, I think this is a really good point that you're making. I want to, this is sort of an ongoing situation for these social media platforms. We'll see what happens in the way of regulation. Obviously, Europe is ahead of the U.S. on this. But I want to ask you about housing reform this morning, sir, because President Trump is now calling to overhaul Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and reduce government footprints in housing finance. What do you think the impact of that will be, and how should this take place? This is something that investors care greatly about. They are upset that under the Obama administration, the President Obama used money from Fannie and Freddie, took it from those institutions and used it really for Obamacare, frankly.
Yes. Well, first of all, you know, those entities, the GSEs, Freddie and Fannie, have been in conservatorship for going on 12 years now. I mean, that's ridiculous. And, you know, it puts the taxpayers at additional risk. We need to be looking at new ways to do things, ways to bring, you know, private capital into the market. There needs obviously to be some type of government guarantee or backstop, but this is not the correct forum for doing that. And we're going to be engaging in deep discussions, all the factors in government, including the Treasury Department, obviously the White House, HUD, looking at what we can do to preserve the American dream for the people and protect the taxpayers at the same time.
Yeah. How would that impact lending, in your view? So, Dr. Carson, a lot of people feel like because of the weakness and the revolution that we've seen in terms of housing and these government institutions really doing the bulk of the lending at the end of the day, that it has had an impact on actual lending and thus the economy. So if we were to free these away from government control, do you think that impacts lending in a better way?
I think the private sector does a very good job with lending because they're interested in obviously being viable economically. So they're going to be paying very close attention to that. But we will obviously be exercising the appropriate amount of oversight to make sure that we protect the taxpayers. And we need to learn from the things that had happened before. We need to understand that putting people, for instance, into a house that they can't afford is not doing them a favor. They lose the house, they lose their credit, and they lose their future options. We have to find better solutions for that. And wise people learn from mistakes.
Yeah. So give us a sense of the housing market right now, Dr. Carson. Are you seeing housing recover in any way? This has been one of the weak spots in this
Sure.
recovery in the last 2 years.
Well, you know, the recovery is going to take time because people don't react immediately. They want to make sure that this is real, that all the economic gains that we have seen over the last 2 years are real, that it's not just a flash in the pan. But it's moving in the correct direction. You'll see, you know, the fluctuation from month to month. You'll see 1 month they're saying, wow, housing starts are up. The next month they say, oh, housing starts are down. What does it all mean? we're all moving in the right direction if you take the conglomeration of all the numbers.
Yeah. So the Treasury is going to possibly establish capital and liquidity requirements for the government-sponsored entities. Does that move the needle on economic growth?
Well, you know, it's going to require a lot of money to back them up, not just the $20 billion or so that they are able to generate and save in 1 year. So that's going to take some real creative financial thinking, but we're working on getting that done.
Well, I mean, if the president is opening this new window in terms of issuing a memo, overhauling these mortgage giants, putting it more into the private sector. You said the private sector does very well in terms of lending. What kind of reform do you want to see out of the Treasury?
Well, first of all, if they're going to come out of conservatorship, and particularly if they're going to become more private entities, they have to have a backstop in the neighborhood of $180 billion. So we want to make sure, in addition to them having that kind of backstop, that you have something behind them in terms of a government sponsored, something like Ginnie Mae or something that we can come up with that people not only in this country but in foreign countries have faith in, so that they can continue to be part of the investment.
So if you need the backstop of $180 billion, you're not taking them fully out of conservatorship, or are you, but with the promise of reliance on the U.S. government in the event of an emergency? I don't understand. Do you want to take them out of conservatorship or not? How does that backstop fit in?
You want to take them out of conservatorship, but if they're out of conservatorship, you have to be absolutely certain that they can continue to function and people won't be afraid of them. Right. So you have to have a reserve, some type of a capital reserve, so that people, it probably won't be used, it probably won't be needed. But if you don't have it, people are going to run for the hills.
I see. Ben Carson, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks so much.
A pleasure.
HUD Secretary Dr. Ben Carson there.